the onset, on the economic sense of it, everyone should support a lean government. And a lean government is the one that is left to only adjudicate the services that touches on the people. And therefore, the government must always strive to cut off excess weight. When you carry more than you need, then it pulls you behind. And that is the reason why, ever since, I have been a proponent of government not engaging in the business of doing business. Because what can be done by others, then the government should leave those other people to do, because they do it much more efficiently. Honorable Speaker, the other reason why government must never be too bulky and engaging in too many commercial ventures is because government of Kenya already owns 35% of all the businesses in Kenya indirectly, including the small company any member would be running in this house today. Because as corporate tax is 35%, it means the government of Kenya is actually in the board of your company all the time. And you actually give them a share of 35% of the profit you make. And it means, therefore, they own 35% of all the enterprises indirectly in terms of stakes and in terms of share of revenue, and especially net revenue. And therefore, Honorable Speaker, across the world, many governments continue to shed off whatever can be done by others, and especially in the private sector. But there is always a debate, internationally speaking, Honorable Speaker, because when you look, for example, an economy like the US, an economy like South Korea, they are private sector driven, meaning the government does not necessarily engage in too much commercial activity. But on the other side, when you look at a company like China, you see an economy where the government is dominant in direct ownership of stakes. And all those economies do well. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it does not necessarily mean everyone is right and entirely right. It all depends on the circumstances, and it all depends on the scenario. Honorable Speaker, the reason why many companies and many governments arrive to the decision of selling many of the corporate entities, and especially the commercial ones they engage in, of course, it enhances efficiency, and of course, and especially when the reason of engaging in it is overtaken by events. Let me give what I mean. As we talk today about the government of Kenya, of us making it easy for offloading of stakes where government have direct shareholding. As late as now, Honorable Speaker, yesterday, the US government was investing in American lithium. They actually invested in a stake of around 5%. In the last 1 month, the US government actually invested $9 billion into Intel. Intel, which was previously a private company. Why? Investments in commercial entities when it comes to the sovereign must be guided on strategic decisions. Why are you engaging in that reason? The reason why you find in Kenya the oldest banks in Kenya, they are national banks in terms of they were previously owned by the state. It was because of the barrier of entry. The barrier of entry of starting a bank back then could only be managed by the sovereign, which is the country, or which is the government. But also the confidence. There are areas, for example, in banking, around that time when it was a novelty, that no one could actually trust an individual person as an investor with their own money when they held ownership of the bank. And those are the reasons why we find, for example, National Bank, Kenya Commercial Bank, had to be started by government that time because of those reasons. But those reasons have been overtaken by events. And the reason why I say so, Honorable Speaker, there is a lot of inefficiency in government-controlled companies in sectors that are booming. Take, for example, Consolidated Bank. Consolidated Bank is over 98% owned by GOK in various forms. But if you look at a bank like Equity Bank is newer than Consolidated Bank. But Consolidated Bank is actually having now net capital as we talk now, when Equity Bank now have shareholders' funds of over 300 billion Kenya shillings, which is core capital. And their profitability, again, are very diverse. So those strategic decisions back then could not hold today. The strategic decision of the US government investing in a chip-making company in aid of AI in the name of Intel is a today agenda, and therefore it is relevant. The reason for the US government investing in American lithium yesterday for a stake of 5% and also taking some of their risks out of where they are mining lithium, Honorable Speaker, is also based on the current global economy, strategic decision making. And therefore, we must always audit and find what is it that is making strategic sense, what is it that is not making strategic sense, so that we can offload as much as possible to the private sector to do what they know best. Honorable Speaker, let me talk about how we should spend the money. The previous agenda was about Kenya Pipeline. And Honorable Speaker, my take would be this. For any company that goes through a listing, through an IPO, we must always reserve around 5 to 10% of the proceeds to invest back in other entities, and especially in alternative ways of offering the same service. What do I mean? As we offload any company, then you must take this money, create a venture capital, and invest in other current growth kind of institutions around the same sector. Green energy, and any other thing around power sector, for example, or energy sector. So that as you offload this, you are incubating some others. So that you don't get a time when you've already offloaded your entire portfolio. Honorable Speaker, let me talk something about the current capital markets, because this is very important even for the agenda we had about Kenya Pipeline, and even this bill. Honorable Speaker, capital market is everything about international capital flow. The US, for example, capital markets in equity side alone is double the size of the US GDP. Because all the companies listed in the US, their valuation cumulatively is around 62 trillion US dollars. In the income sectors, in the fixed income side, it is over 55 trillion. What do I mean, Honorable Speaker? If you compare the same with our capital markets here, it is too small, Honorable Speaker. And therefore, we must make every effort to make it more bigger and attractive. But this is the catch, Honorable members. I am one of the people who would never actually vouch for the listing of Kenya Pipeline. And I'll give you a very practical reason. The current NSE in Kenya has been bearish this year, going up. But the companies listed are still grossly undervalued. And I can tell you without blinking of an eye, Honorable Speaker, this issue of Kenya Pipeline will bring a lot of excitement. Kenyans will buy in the IPO. But after the announcement of the financial results in February for the full year, the share company will collapse. And the share price will collapse. And this is the reason. The current investor in the NSC are not buying assets. They are buying revenue. They are buying the bottom line. What do I mean? Look, for example, a company like Kenya Power. Kenya Power has a valuation, the entire Kenya Power has only a valuation, a market cap of only 27 billion. The reason I use the name only is in comparative to the assets. It has assets of over 350 billion shillings. And it's a company that's making net revenues of 20 billion, but the valuation is 27 billion. Now, a company like Kenya Re, a company has net assets of over 51 billion, net assets. And the valuation in the market, Honorable Speaker, is 17 billion shillings. This company, Kenyans will buy out of excitement, but after the announcement next year of the full year results, the share price will collapse. And that is why I am also fearing that the government may end up forcing NSSF and other provident funds to actually take part in this, because commercially it may not be viable for a logical investor. And that is why we need to draw the line, so that we
Honorable NDINDI will be given 2 more minutes.
And Honorable Speaker, I think I have made that point. The current investor is not buying assets. The current investor in the market is buying net revenue. And if you look at the profitability of Kenya Pipeline, last year was 6.8 billion. Average for 5 years is 5 billion. An equivalent company in the NSC making a profit of 5 billion, including a bank, the valuation is not more than 35 billion. So that is the kind of valuation that investors are going to encounter as we come on next. The other thing is control. We fight government-owned entities, Honorable Speaker. Government owns 18% of KCB, but then control 100% of the board. That is one of the things that even the listing of the asset that will be listed should be captured. That the government cannot own 35% of an asset, then control 100% of the board. The other 65% should be given board positions. And if the government is giving the CEO, then the chairman should not be from the government, should be from the private sector. Honorable Speaker, the real valuation I was talking about, this is a topic I can talk about the whole day, Honorable Speaker. If you look at a company like Kengen, the valuation is around 55 billion. If you look at the peers in a place like Nigeria, like Geregu Power, Transcorp Power, doing the same and producing less, actually have the capacity of Kengen. The valuation is 200 billion respectively and 211 billion Kenya shillings if you convert from Naira. So what am I trying to say? Our market is not doing justice to valuations. And listing a company now may not suffice. Maybe a strategic investor. Unfortunately, strategic investor cannot work in an area like Kenya where we have a deficit in trust in government. Because if you do strategic investor, the high probability is that patronage will be, and the person on the other side of the table will actually be the one buying.
The Honorable Catherine Omanyo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I support this bill fully because, first of all, public participation must be done because it involves public property. And anything that is owned by the public